Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you and nice to talk to you again. After some time, we are live again, and I'm really excited about that, especially about this event today, because we have a topic that I'm not really familiar with, just a little bit. But that's why I have a great specialist with me. Ed, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Ed, I will ask you a little bit later to introduce yourself a little bit more in detail, but I will just tell so far that you are coming from Avalara and that you are actually very senior in the area of e-invoicing, and this is great. So we will talk about that quite very soon. Before we start and before we go into the details, let me just give to our audience some, let's say, general views and words about this event. So first, we are streaming over several different channels. We are streaming on YouTube, we are streaming on LinkedIn, and we are streaming on X as a video. But at the same time, we are also streaming as a X space. So you can join our audio stream on X space. And why is that so interesting? Because on X spaces, you can join us. You can discuss with us. You can raise your hand, give me a sign, and I can include you in the stream live just now and just on the stage. So I think this is very interesting, especially if you have any additional questions related to the topic that we have today. And the topic is e-invoicing. We will talk about trends. We will talk about e-invoicing itself. We will talk about the things that we think are coming very soon. Partially, we will talk about, of course, about the fiscalization as well, as this is something what we are doing, my company. And we will try to make the line between e-invoicing and fiscalization with special focus on retail, of course. But if you have any kind of questions related to e-invoicing or fiscalization, feel free to join us in the space. And I see already Dushan is there. Hello, Dushan. Um, if anybody else wants to talk, just give me a sign and I will include you. So, Ed, welcome. And maybe you would like to introduce yourself shortly, and of course, a couple of words of related to Avalara as well, because I think it's very interesting to hear who is Ed and who is Avalara.
Brilliant. Thank you. So my name's Ed Smith. I'm the Senior E-Invoicing Solution Consultant at Avalara. My background is e-invoicing and EDI. So I started off in professional services I want to say about 7 years ago now, actually implementing e-invoicing in EDI solutions to businesses. And from there, I moved into pre-sales, taking my technical knowledge, my on-the-ground experience, and helping customers try and find the best solution for them. But I joined Avalara 2.5 years ago to help rebuild and replatform our e-invoicing solution, and then moved back into pre-sales to help out our customers make sure they get the right fit, making sure that actually they know what they're on about when it comes to e-invoicing, because it is a brand new topic for a lot of people, even though it has been around for a while. And yeah, so that's what I've been doing now. But a bit about Avalara. So
Yes.
Avalara is a indirect tax technology company. We've been around for about 20 years now, and we have grown quite a bit in that time. So we currently have 15 offices around the world, with coming up towards 5,000 employees, and we're currently supporting over 41,000 customers in 75 countries. And that is from a range of products, from the kind of tax reporting, doing your periodic returns, doing your tax determination and calculations, actually registering and fiscal representation, and more recently, in the last few years, we've moved towards e-invoicing as well, as that's sort of where we see the direction of travel for tax compliance and becoming a bigger and bigger issue for our customers.
That sounds so great because 70 plus countries. So this is a huge number. I know how complex it is to handle all those different laws and different requirements. So not bad. So really, I'm really surprised, positively surprised. Yes.
Yeah, no, there's a big team of people behind the scenes to actually make sure that we are compliant with all the different countries, because as you said, it is not easy.
Yeah. Uh, Great. Thank you very much for this short introduction. We will go more into the detail because I know there are several topics which I'm very interested in, and I'm sure the audience as well. But let me introduce shortly first myself. I'm Darko. I will be your host today. I'm one of the co-founders of the company called Fiscal Solutions. And as the name is saying, we are actually doing nothing else but the fiscalization, fiscal part, for 27 countries, fiscal countries, of course. And we are trying to make the fiscalization easier for the POS software vendors and for the retailers. We are trying to help anyone, whoever wants that, but we are most familiar with large systems, let's say, in large enterprises, which are globally present. And that's why it was very interesting for us to work with Avalara, because Avalara is also a very global company, being able to handle all those many different requirements around the globe. The topic related to the e-invoicing was in particular very interesting for us because the governments are starting, let's say, a little bit to mix those topics. So we saw many countries which are just popping up to introduce the new fiscal law, but they are trying to combine the fiscal laws with e-invoicing laws. And these two worlds are still very complex, each of them separately. And if you want to handle them together, then it's getting even more complex. So that's why the countries are at the beginning talking about both, let's say, environments and both laws, but then they separate the projects into steps. They implement mostly first the fiscal topics, fiscalization, and then they move towards e-invoicing. But if somebody is asking me to explain the differences between e-invoicing and fiscalization, I have to admit that it's getting more complex, let's say, not that easy as in the past. But maybe the simplest explanation would be both of the areas are related to the taxes. Both of areas have a target to improve the tax handling, let's say, to reduce gray economy and all these kind of things. But e-invoicing is more focused on the B2B and fiscalization more to be on the area B2C, so business to consumer, to customer. But this is very, let's say, bird view on these two topics. Ed, could I ask you to explain us a little bit more what is actually e-invoicing? How can we understand it better?
Yeah. So, I mean, to your point, they are very similar things with fiscalization and e-invoicing. They're ultimately trying to achieve the same thing, which is where you're trying to reduce fraud, reduce VAT, get more data to the tax authorities. Now, e-invoicing has been around for a while, and what it is essentially is the exchange of an invoice or credit note, debit note, but done in a structured format where it's from computer to computer, where you're automating that process, and rather than it having manual intervention and being a PDF or something through the post. So it's much quicker, there's less errors involved because there's no issues with rekeying information, etc. But when we're talking about e-invoicing in general, what our customers normally mean is where a tax authority has said, you have to do this in a particular type of way, and you have to send data to us at the same time or send it through our network. And so e-invoicing is just the exchange. However, when we're talking about e-invoicing in general, what we're talking about is a tax authority going, hey, as of this date, businesses that are sending an invoice need to do it in this format, and it may be that they need to clear the invoice data with us first. So send it to us, we approve it, you can then send it on. In other cases, it's sending it through a centralized network. In other cases, it's that kind of crossover with real-time reporting where you can send your invoice out, but you also need to report it at the same time to the tax authority. And of course, and as everything, every country's decided to do things slightly differently to meet their own requirements. And so the complexity of it is, right, what countries I'm in, what am I doing? What do I actually need to do to comply with these legislations? Exactly the same as fiscalization, really. It did come out, as you said, from the B2B sector and B2G. However, we are seeing more mandates that are including the B2C, either through those kind of clearance models or the real-time reporting as well. So there is definitely a little crossover between fiscalization and e-invoicing. For the most part, they are separate processes, but there are definite times where it sort of merges into one.
Let me ask you something, because you mentioned the reporting topic, and I was reading about continuous transaction control. And this is actually something which is common name, let's say, for reporting of the transactions directly online to the authority. This is actually fiscalization, am I right? Because many countries like Croatia, for example, has to report each and every transaction to the tax authority, get a signature, and then issue the receipt. It's very similar, am I right?
Yeah, very similar. And that's what I'm saying. The fiscalization is essentially is doing what e-invoicing has done on the B2B side, where you are doing that real-time reporting, where the tax authority wants that visibility. They're trying to eliminate the kind of backhand cash transactions, or where you're reporting something that never existed and trying to claim that back on your VAT report. Because ultimately the periodic return is being seen as too little too late. It's not the right information. They're not able to identify fraud until it's already happened. It's far harder to try and bring that back. Whereas when they're getting those real-time transactions or the batch upload at the end of the day, they're able to identify any issues far quicker. If you look in some of Latin America, for example, they're actually able to identify the fraud as it's happening because of how much information they're tracking. It really is quite impressive.
You mentioned something, or actually you just explained it, that the governments are actually using the data which they are getting. I remember as we implemented the fiscalization in Croatia, and that was that concept that I just explained, then many people were telling us, hey, the governments will collect the data, but they never analyze them. So you can send the data whatever you like and it will be good. Nobody will check it. But it's not like that. And right, the governments are
That's
really
not the
using
case.
those data.
Yeah, and it's going to be more and more with, I know it's one of the topics that we're going to cover today, but VAT in the digital age, the kind of cross-border reporting, it's no longer just going to be countries isolated doing it on their own. They're going to be talking to each other. So there's going to be data. If someone sends a transaction from France into Germany and goes, well, I don't have to worry about that. That's over there. I don't have to pay my VAT on it. Actually, it may be the case that you are going to have to, because France is going to tell Germany that you actually sent that transaction. So that is the direction of travel. It is going to be more and more kind of real-time information going to the tax authorities. And yeah, you're right. They are going to be looking at it.
Sure, because the real benefits are created for the governments if they combine the data, especially in the invoicing area, especially related to the companies and the tax reporting, which is related to that. But the fact is actually somehow e-invoicing is getting also a little bit trend. So everybody is talking about that. Even we are talking now about that. And it's even getting the trend. Just if you talk about e-invoicing, you are good. You will be somewhere on the top lists on the social network. But tell me, please, as a specialist, which trends do you see actually? What's going on in the e-invoicing area?
Well, so one of the big things coming is the VAT in the Digital Age package, where they are bringing, or the European Commission has put a package together, and part of that is making e-invoicing slightly more standard. Because historically, we've seen countries put their own things in place. It's taken a lot of work, a lot of effort on their side to do so. And as part of that, we are seeing countries like Germany who are introducing a very soft mandate, setting everything up ready for when this package comes in place. As hopefully it gets approved and it all goes through, but it's been rejected a couple of times now, so we'll see how that goes. But the other side of that is the mandates like France, which is a huge mandate. It's quite all-encompassing and far more than we've seen for some other countries, or majority of other countries. What we're seeing there is they are building something that is going to be compatible with those recommendations, with the guidelines put in place, where the tax authority is not actually involved to be in place in the kind of center of that transaction, but you're getting the reporting of that data. But more and more countries are introducing this. They're all seeing the benefits of reducing fraud, but also digitizing their processes as well. And if we really look into the future, we can see it in Chile already. They're actually pre-populating your tax return based on your e-invoicing data, because you should have sent every transaction to them. So if you go to them, hey, no, this is wrong, they're going to ask you why and why you never reported that up front. And so globally, that's what we're seeing. Europe's normally a few years behind Latin America when it comes to e-invoicing. And yeah, as we've said with VAT in Digital Age, it's going to be cross-border transactions being reported and that data actually being centralized. So it's no longer going to be individual countries introducing things. It is going to be a cross-EU initiative.
Let me stop at that small point. You mentioned the cross-border business. And this is something which is, I think, very interesting, especially if we are talking about e-commerce. So I see on the side of the fiscalization trend to make the e-commerce business more and more fiscal relevant as well. A couple of years ago, nobody cared about e-commerce, and now suddenly you have to apply the fiscal laws also in the e-commerce business, which is actually fine. This should not be excluded from my point of view. But as the globalization is kicking in, we have more and more global businesses. There are no borders. So, but somehow you have to handle the different VATs, VAT rates, and different rules. In Europe, especially, I'm sure you are familiar with VIDA. We had the discussion about VIDA a couple of weeks ago, and I know that e-invoicing is a very important part of that. Can you give us a little bit your view, let's say, about cross-border business, one-stop shop, and maybe evolution of that, which we could call VIDA in this case? How do you see it, and what are the major points from your point of view?
So there's three main pillars I see to VIDA. The first is improving and expanding the kind of one-stop shop process, that single VAT registration across Europe, rather than having to be registered in every country and tracking all of that. You can have your single registration. And so they're expanding that out to basically make things easier for businesses. And especially, as you mentioned, with the kind of e-commerce, the platform economy, the selling out across Europe, it's an open market. And so they're trying to make that easier for businesses to do so. The other side, as you mentioned,
it seems that we lost Ed, but the system is reconnected.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Ed, we have you with us again. That's good.
Oh, brilliant.
So you're reconnected. Great.
Yeah, sorry about that. So they're trying to make things easier for those businesses to be able to register under a single entity and have that single VAT registration. The other side is actually updating the VAT legislations to accommodate the platform economy, the e-commerce side that previously has sort of sat slightly outside of it. And as you mentioned, they're trying to bring in those legislations more in place to actually incorporate that with fiscalization, with e-invoicing and reporting of the cross-border transactions, because we are a kind of globalized economy. It's not as it was where you were selling the majority of the time just within a single country. And as part of that, they're introducing real-time digital reporting for VAT purposes. But one of the biggest things is the kind of centralized reporting of cross-border transactions. So all countries will be able to see any of those cross-border transactions. As e-invoicing has been largely focused around domestic transactions previously. And so this is a big step up. And as I mentioned, if you're selling from wherever it may be into multiple countries around Europe, they're going to know that you're doing that. It's not going to be possible where some people may have been getting away with not necessarily reporting those correctly, or trying to sit outside of the VAT laws by going, well, I'm selling over here, I'm not registered, I don't need to worry about that. They're going to be able to see it, and in real time. So it's definitely going to shift things. And that is one of the biggest blockers for introducing VIDA so far is Estonia are worried about the impact that's going to have on their economy and on the platform economy, bringing that into play. So the other kind of issue around that is this is a full package. There are multiple elements of it. There's lots of things going on, but because it's a single package, everything has to be approved to get through. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that goes, but it will also be far easier when it does come into play for European economies to introduce a e-invoicing mandate. At the moment, they'd have to get a derogation, they have to put proposals together, they have to go through permission on what to do. Going forwards, it will be a lot easier for them to introduce it as long as they're compliant with the European Commission standards on e-invoicing. So yeah, we'll expect to see more and more mandates. I was recently talking to the Irish Tax Authority on what they were planning on doing, and they've openly said until VIDA's coming in, they don't plan on changing anything. They don't want to put anything in place now that may be impacted or may be stopped, or they have to rebuild it, which means there'll be additional costs for businesses, for platforms to put it in place.
But let me understand something a little bit better. So we are not talking about two different e-invoicing systems. So VIDA will somehow include the existing one, right? So the retailers should not be afraid that they have to implement the local one, let's say the local e-invoicing systems, and then something else which is directed by VIDA rules. Am I right? So it will
Correct.
be...
Yeah, so any existing mandate will be grandfathered in. So they're not going to immediately change that. And the way that your service provider should work is basically reporting that data as well. And that's why the benefit of going for a kind of global solution provider rather than point-to-point integrations is that this is a global issue or a
I think we
multi-country
lost
issue.
that again. So I'm sorry
Uh,
for that. But the
I
point,
can hear you
yes,
fine.
you are
Yeah.
back. That's good. Okay, maybe it was on my side. It can be. Yes, I'm sorry for that.
That's all
So
right.
you mentioned that the benefit talking to one supplier, let's say, who is able to cover all those different requirements. I think this is what you wanted to point out, right?
Yeah, so having a single provider that's able to cover all of these different requirements under a single
Yes.
solution is going to be huge.
Yes.
Because previously what we've seen is someone going and going, right, well, I've got Italy, I've got a requirement there, so I'm going to go for a local provider. And then they've got Romania that's come in place, and they've got Germany next year, and they've got France in 2 years. And by that point, you've ended up four different solutions, four different support plans, four different contracts. You update your ERP, you've got to redo every single one of those integrations.
Mhm.
So what we're finding is that a single solution can actually cover everything under a single house. You have a single support plan, you have a single integration that can meet those. It is easier to expand and actually scale it up to meet the different requirements. And so that's what we're recommending really. Start looking at this and actually getting this in place ahead of time, or at least get to a position where you're prepared knowing full well that this is going to be coming down the line. It's not something that is a kind of theoretical at some point it's going to happen in the future. It is happening. It's already being introduced. So it's not something you can really wait around until last minute to do.
You are really giving us a very important and very good point. We know a little bit this area of the problems as well because we are working with large retailers which are actually having operations in several countries, and if they have to develop different point of sale version or whatever version of the software per country, this is increasing the cost of the implementation on one side, but later even the cost of the maintenance, which are even getting much higher. Because then to manage that environment, if you go country by country with different suppliers, these costs are really, really huge. So that's why I completely agree with you. If retailer in our case has to deal with one company which is able to cover as less as possible integrations and as less as possible changes in all other systems in the retail environment, then it's much better for them and more cost effective. Um, just to put on the table so that people understand, retailers have more than 20, even more, let's say, complex systems around them to run the operations. If we start with supply chain management, with the financial parts, with the general ERP, of course, point of sale, customer loyalty, and so on and so on. And then they have to integrate all the different hardware environments. So the retail is very, very specific. And if they would need to implement e-invoicing in each country separately, additionally, or post-fiscalization, it would increase the cost dramatically. Let's go a little bit more into the store because we are coming from the store. So we are familiar mostly with the store environment. What do you think about, let's say, influences of the e-invoicing to the typical physical store of the retailer? So let's leave the e-commerce and come a little bit more into the retail. Do you see any kind of interfaces or influences more or less?
Yeah, definitely. The biggest thing for e-invoicing in the retail space is the pre-clearance model, which is where you have to clear an invoice with the tax authority before you can actually submit it. And there's a kind of change to that more where you would be reporting that data or clearing it later. But you then have a requirement to do things like QR codes or unique IDs that need to be included on those invoices. And a lot of this actually requires you to have a real-time connection to the tax authority to do. Now, within the retail side, for the most part, we're pretty much covered now where there is going to be decent infrastructure in place. But one of the biggest challenges we're seeing is when businesses know that their local infrastructure isn't good, that their internet cuts out all the time. How do they actually clear that? What do they have in place? And there are always backup processes available, but that's what we're seeing more and more. And it goes hand in hand with the kind of fiscalization reporting side, where actually you're going to be reporting this data in bulk at the end of the day or in real time, where you've got to make everything visible to the tax authority. And that's where there's the kind of it goes hand in hand, either the clearance through e-invoicing or the fiscalization reporting of that data. They're both achieving the same things. They're just going around them in a slightly different way. The biggest challenge we see for businesses where they have the point of sale side is when they have the point of sale side where in the stores that they're also doing wholesale at the same side and selling that on B2B, because then they're going to just be clobbered by absolutely everything in one go.
Yes. This is a big issue. And by the way, this is the reason why we integrated with Avalara. Uh, Actually, most of the retailers have to cover part of the B2B process in the store as well, because they don't know if the customer will come and request the B2B invoice because of the tax reasons he need one. So this means sooner or later, every retailer in the world will need to cover somehow the e-invoicing issue, or at least invoicing issue, and then later maybe in the process e-invoicing issue. I remember the situation that I had in Poland many years ago. I was responsible for the implementation of the POS project in a large supermarket chain. And I remember that we had to implement invoicing with not e-invoicing, but invoicing, which was part of the fiscal law. It was called Factura VAT, and you had to be able to invoice or to issue an invoice according to the fiscal law to the end user if that end user is requesting it. So you had to collect all the data, customer name, and all the VAT numbers and everything, and issue the invoice. The POSs had a really big issue with that. They were not able to do that, at least in some part of the country at some retailers. So they splitted the processes. They moved the customer to certain place in the store, usually information desk, and the customer had first to finish the transaction on the POS. Then he took all the items that he had with the trolley. He went to the information desk, and then he asked, with a receipt in the hand, could you issue one invoice for this transaction for me? And then the cashier on the information desk started most probably financial system like ERP part, and issued then invoice related to that transaction. So this is a really complex issue because you have two processes which are totally separated. At the end, they are handling the same issue, same topic, the transaction, the sales transaction. So this was the moment, and this was a couple of years ago, as I understood that we have to find a way to join those two processes. Later, some of the POS systems become able to issue the invoices, but then not able to issue e-invoices. So the problem was still there. And that was the reason why we decided to integrate our fiscal solution, let's say, with Avalara, and to bring with that integration the enterprise level e-invoicing to the POS, so that retailer not need anymore to separate the processes. Retailer don't need to think about two different ways to handle the more or less same transaction, and they don't need to integrate once again with something else because they already integrated with us. This was, by the way, the reason why we integrated, and I think the retailers have a really huge benefits by that. So there is a huge influence, at least from my point of view, coming from e-invoicing in the store level or to the stores. And I think some kind of solutions like we presented one are absolutely needed. So, but coming back to Germany, because you mentioned Germany and many of our audience knows that I'm from Germany, so I'm very interested in that topic. Tell me more about that. I know that they are trying something, but how far is Germany actually? What do you expect? What will come soon in Germany?
So it's definitely coming as of January 2025. So Germany are introducing quite a soft mandate, as I think I mentioned earlier, in preparation for VAT and digital age to come in. Now, the way that they have done this is that as of January 25, you have to be able to receive an e-invoice should someone send one to you. Now, they're getting rid of what's called buyer consent. So at the moment, if I wanted to send you an e-invoice, I would have to agree with you how we're going to do it. You'd have to accept that, and we'd agree amongst ourselves. It would be in this format with this connection, etc., etc. Whereas going forwards, if I want to send you an e-invoice, as long as it meets the EN 16931 standards, which the two formats are kind of the X invoice and X Reckoning, which is, and Zugwert, which have both been around for a while. If I want to send you one of those formats, you have to be able to accept that and be able to process it. Now, the Zug file, it's got a nice PDF on it. So you've got a visualization of it, and you've got an XML embedded within it to be able to automate the process of taking that data in. But the other format, the X-invoice or X-reckoning file, that's an XML file. If I just send you a dump of data in an XML file and go, that's my invoice, please go and pay it, you now have to be able to process that. So what we're finding is we've got two kind of main customer bases. One are going, well, I'm just going to do the inbound side and I just need something to be able to process it. And then the other side are going, I want to automate the entire end from the inbound side, and I want to start sending e-invoices today. Because it's not until January 2027 where businesses over 800,000 euros in turnover have to actually start submitting e-invoices, and then a year later for the rest of the businesses. So it is quite a slow rollout. We're expecting some organic growth where people are going to start using it voluntarily ahead of 2027. But it's not until then that we're expecting the big bang of everybody to really start using it. So it is a bit of a headache for our customers who are going, well, do I need it or can I get away with not having it? What I'd say is it's a risk decision for your business as to whether you choose to go with an e-invoicing solution or to be able to process that. Because if you do receive one, you have to be able to. And so an exercise that could be useful is going to talk to your customers or to your suppliers and find out, does anybody actually intend to send you any invoices? This is only for domestic transactions as well. So cross-border is not included, and both parties have to be VAT registered within Germany to be seen as being required to do this. And everything that this is doing is setting up the platform so that when e-reporting comes into place with the VAT in the Digital Age package, it will be very easy to do so as people are already sending and receiving the structured data of an e-invoice in a format that is compliant with the VIDA initiative.
So actually,
it's a long road.
your recommendation is already now to start talking to the suppliers to see what are those guys planning, and then to adjust, let's say, own strategies according to that, right?
Yep. Yeah. If you choose not to have a solution in place, that is a risk. If someone sends you an e-invoice and you have no way of processing it, that is a risk.
Yes.
But the investment, the cost, if you've only got two suppliers, then it may be something that you go, you know what, they've told us they're not going to do it, we're going to wait. If you've got 50, 60 different suppliers and you don't have enough time to actually go and speak to them all to find out, then I'd probably put a solution in place.
I'm sure that it makes sense,
yeah.
especially if we are talking about the retail, which is actually more focus of our business in the moment.
Yep.
All retailers that we are talking to in the moment have lots of different suppliers, and not just in one country, even in several countries. So I am sure it makes sense for them to think about it already now. But tell me, I understood that 2027 is something like official date, which should be like starting point for the official law or mandate. Am I right? Is it 2027?
So the first part of the mandate is from January 25, where you
Okay.
have to be able to receive it, and that is mandated. So you have to be able to process it should you receive it. And then from 2027 is the outbound side, where you would then have to start submitting the invoices. And that's why I was saying it's a very soft mandate, because we've still got 3 years or 2 and a bit years until actually larger businesses are going to have to start submitting the invoices.
But for this means actually it's tomorrow. So 2025 is basically tomorrow. So even
you've got less than 2 months to do it.
yes, this is nothing for such huge systems. So the projects take lots of time to integrate and to run and so on. So even just to receive, because just receive doesn't mean I get the document, I have to process it somehow. And this is the complexity, not just receiving. You could receive it with whatever, even with USB stick, but then to handle it and to include it in all the processes behind, I think this is the biggest issue after that, right?
Yep. And there's no agreed upon format on how you would receive that. We're expecting most people to send and receive via email, just because it's easy and most people have got that process set up already. The PEPL network, which is a kind of voluntary framework to send and receive e-invoices and is compliant because it uses the X-Rechnung format within Germany. That is a good way to automate the entire process and have kind of better probably better and more automated, more efficient processes in place. It is harder around the retail side in the sense that your customers aren't going to be on it, or consumers. But if you're talking about the kind of supplier side, that is definitely a good way of going about it. And we're expecting a lot of businesses to use that. It's already got a huge adoption around Europe, especially within the Nordics and Belgium, etc. And we're just seeing that going up and up. So we are expecting that to be a good way to doing it, but it doesn't cover your B2C transactions. But saying that, it's only for B2B transactions within
Mhm.
Germany to begin with anyway. But yeah, definitely
And
something to
it's
keep an eye on.
and it's not so. I understood that the transmission way how the retailers, for example, have to receive the e-invoices is not specified by the government, so it's still
Nope.
open. Not
So
good.
it could be email, it could be a supplier
Yeah.
portal, it could be if you've got an old FTP server set up somewhere that you're receiving them. It that section of it isn't actually dictated by the legislation. So
So yeah,
it's a
this
bit of
means
a headache.
yeah, definitely. And based on the experience which we have, at least in other countries, uh, if you do that in these kind of steps, like first step, the format of the invoice, and then the platform that you have to use for the exchange of the data, this means probably that you will have to change your integration several times, because if they implement a new platform, the retailer has to integrate with that. So this means you have again integration. Coming back to the point, if you are using the supplier, provider of the solution who has already several integration in several different countries, then you are easier to go.
Yeah. And,
Good to
and
go.
with the way that we've built it as well is that there are some times where there's changes on the service provider side, but it doesn't change the data points that are going across. It just could be new things that we need to do, or digital signatures or something like that.
Mhm,
And the way that
mhm,
we built it is that that has no impact on the integration with you, where there's just something that we as a service provider need to do. We
mhm,
do that on our side. They're still connecting through the connector from your side into us. There's no change on their point, and they're still compliant, even though there are changes going on. And that's one of the biggest driving, because ultimately you could build this yourself for Germany. And we've got
mhm.
customers that have come to us, have started doing that, realized how much of a nightmare it is. They're going to have to start maintaining themselves, and they're going, please, can you do it for us? So when you're looking at how you want to tackle this, it really is weighing up what you want to do. And the benefit of going to someone like Avalara is that, yeah, you've got the global solution. Yes, you've got the single consistent integration, but you have that expertise on tax compliance and
This is
making
a huge
sure that it's
point.
correct.
Yes.
And we
Yes.
manage that. So it's one less thing for you to worry about on how do I get everything set up to actually do my core business and what I'm wanting to do of selling stuff in my store.
Yeah, this is huge issue, and this is very similar, let's say, benefit that we are creating for our customers. At the end, the point that we want to stress out always is the responsibility issue as well. So we are responsible for the things that we are doing, and we are ensuring that all of them are according to the law. If you're doing it by yourself, you have to be responsible by yourself as well. So that's why
Yeah.
this is an interesting point as well. Coming back to those countries, so Germany is very interesting, of course, but do you see other countries which are also very complex and very soon, more or less tomorrow, to do?
Um, So your biggest ones coming up are probably going to be Belgium, Poland, Spain's coming next year supposedly, although we've had very little information about how that's going to work. And then France is coming in 2 years' time, or yeah, in 2026. And so those are some of the biggest economies in Europe, and they're probably some of the most complex mandates coming up. Belgium's not too bad. They're just carrying on doing what they're doing voluntarily today with using the PEPL mandate. Poland, KSCF, it was, I'm sure people are aware if they've been involved with that. It's been delayed twice and is now coming in 2026. It is a far more stable service now, and we actually have customers using it voluntarily today. So we know it does work, whereas before that was definitely an issue. And then France is going to be the biggest mandate and probably what most of our customers are stressing about at the moment. Just because the fact that it actually encompasses so much more. It's a way of working through interoperability. So service providers actually have to agree amongst themselves. There's a sort of framework put in place, but otherwise we have to agree how we're going to connect to each other and maintaining that list of who's registered on what service provider, etc. What is e-invoicing and what is reporting, because e-invoicing is going to do your domestic B2B and B2G transactions, but there's going to then be reporting of any B2C transactions and any cross-border. So making sure all of that comes into play from day one. Italy took years to get to that place where they had all of that stuff going on.
Mhm.
So it's going to be a big shift, and there's loads of other things like updates on when you've been paid, and if you're using a factor rather than paying it yourself. There's a lot to it that really is going to be a big shift for businesses within France. And from a service provider point of view as well, there are a lot of requirements around data sovereignty and making sure that you're registered within France, and it's promoting French businesses, which sort of goes against everything the European Commission is really standing for as being a one Europe. But they are trying to drive everything so that everything remains in France. So
If I compare that with fiscalization, it's strange, but fiscalization was in France also the most complex in Europe. So, and we are still treating it as the most complex, although it's just a fiscal, it's just a software base, so you don't need any kind of additional hardware or something like that, like maybe in Bulgaria or Romania. But it's from the software point of view the most complex. So that's why I see I'm a little bit familiar with this way of thinking to make everything complex. It sounds really complicated, yes.
yeah.
What are the dates? Do you have any dates related to France? What are the steps that they want to implement, and maybe some timeline or something like that? Do you know something about
Yeah.
that?
So the first wave in France is going in 2026. I think it's September. I'm just checking that now. But they're doing a phased approach where all businesses have to be able to receive e-invoices from the 1st of September in 2026. And then large and medium companies, and I don't have the exact range for that, but we can get that, must be able to issue them. And then from September 2027, small, medium enterprises and micro enterprises will then join along on that. So again, it's that kind of phased approach. Everyone's got to be able to receive it, but then who actually is sending e-invoices is done on a phased approach. To be a provider or to have a provider in there, they either have to be called what's a PDP or a PPF. Now, a PDP is someone that does everything themselves, and Avalara has just been granted our accreditation as a PDP within France already. And a PPF basically relies on a PDP to be able to connect. And so when you're looking for a provider, you will find a lot of companies or ERPs themselves may be saying that they are a PPF because they're connecting to a PDP. They're using someone else and partnering with them. And that's fine, but you're then going to have two steps in the process before you actually your invoice has even been sent out. And so something to be aware of is whether you want that, where you may have a bit of finger pointing of going backwards and forwards of, no, it's their fault, no, it's their fault kind of thing. Or do you want to go straight and find a PDP who's doing it themselves and acting on your behalf? Yeah, so yeah, 1st of September is when it's first coming in, and then a year later for the rest of small, medium enterprise and micro enterprises. There may be changes. It is still 2 years away. Every
Mm.
mandate that we've seen go live, often 6 months beforehand, they sort of go, oh, we hadn't thought about this particular scenario. No, we now need to add this. So it is something to stay on top of and keep looking at. It's not something you go, oh yeah, no, that's 2 years away and it's going to definitely be the same as what they've said it is now, because we just know that that's not the case. But PDPs, because of how much is going in to actually doing this, they're going through their certification process now, and genuinely it is a good time to start looking at putting this in place, because if you suddenly got every business going I need e-invoicing on this particular date, you're going to have a lot or quite a high lead time, or you're going to have to pay a lot of money to actually find someone to implement a solution for you or to implement it yourself in time for that mandate. So it is something that you really need to start looking at now.
I completely agree with that. And this is so familiar with me because all these kind of plans, which are then moved a couple of months before, are completely the same in the fiscal environment because probably the same governments are doing it. And that's why
Yeah.
that's the way. And it's complex issue. Let's pick up a short question from our audience. We have Nicolina with us, and she is asking, what are common challenges business face when implementing e-invoicing, and how do you, means Avalara, of course, address them? This is good to talk about the benefits, let's say, of Avalara and how you are solving the biggest challenges which we have.
Yeah, so one of the biggest issues we find is actually the quality of the data in the ERP system. Because it may have been that, yeah, I don't know, someone decided it was a good idea to put the postcode in address line 3. And then you start trying to integrate across to someone, you find the data is not where you expect it to be, and it starts taking longer. And there are specific requirements that countries have around data points. It may be something that you're not tracking already. So one of the biggest challenges we see sort of happens before you even find an e-invoicing provider, which is, does my ERP have the data in it? Do I need to get it from another system and integrate it and create a data lake or a centralized way of working? And how do I then connect to that provider? Now, the way that Avalara has done that is that we've tried to be system agnostic and be simple with our open APIs that you can connect to. But we've also worked with the likes of Fiscal Solutions and other ERP providers to either build ourselves or through partners direct integrations into your ERP. So it may be that you are using Fiscal Solutions for your retail side for the fiscalization, but you then do have your B2B section going through NetSuite or something. So the way that we've built it is to be able to accommodate each business's different challenges and different requirements on their side. The other thing is understanding internally who are your stakeholders and who is it that's actually going to be doing this. One of the biggest things we keep seeing is that customers are going, I feel like I'm the boy who cried wolf because I've said an e-invoicing mandate's coming and the world is ending if we don't do something. And then it gets delayed and then I have to go, oh no, the world's ending again a year later. And so trying to actually get that buy-in, get that emphasis internally and getting people to agree to it can often be a challenge. Yeah, so that's probably two of the biggest things that we find from our customers. And then the other side, but as I mentioned earlier, if you wait until last minute and then try to put a solution in place, one, you may choose something that's not right for you because you've actually just, it's last minute and you've gone, oh, I need something, first person I speak to, I'll go with their solution. The other side of that is actually you've then got either you're paying extra for the lead times to get it implemented, or you're going to be late and actually be penalized. Malaysia, thankfully, as an example, decided to push back how long it was going to be before they started penalizing people as long as they did additional steps if they were non-compliant. Because if you do it wrong repeatedly, you can end up in jail. So it's not a kind of, oh, it's just a slap on the wrist and a fine. Your primary contact, whoever is in charge of tax within that country, can actually end up in jail if you are repeatedly non-compliant. So there are sometimes quite big risks of leaving this last minute and not being compliant with the e-invoicing mandates.
Yeah, actually, this means for the retailer, start already now. Even if you don't have a mandate tomorrow, be ready because it's not that simple. And I can just let's say confirm what you said because we had lots of integrations with many different systems in the retail environments, many different POS systems, and even ERP systems. And each integration is always complex by itself. And you mentioned in the beginning because the data are maybe not there. And if they are not there, then you have to create them actually in order to be able to integrate. And then after you integrate it, you have to be sure that your integration is correct. So this means it's integration on the let's say enterprise level is never that simple. Why I'm talking about that? Because I see we have a Richard with us. Richard is a very interesting and very good specialist, let's say, in the matter of the interfacing and the data formats in the retail. He was the person who defined something what we called in retail ARTS data model. And it is very interesting data model that retailers are using. And this is bringing me to the question, actually, beside the standards which are government actually defining or not defining, do you see any standards which are relevant, let's say, for the retailers? So if they prepare somehow for those standards, they could be, let's say, more ready for something what is coming. In retail, we have something like that.
Yeah, your best bet with e-invoicing is to look at the European Commission standards. It's called the EN 16931. And you'll hear it thrown around a lot more over the next few years. But basically, that is the data points they see should be included within an e-invoice as standard. And as long as it has those, then you're good to go for the majority of it. You've got the mandatory basic information of an e-invoice. And it's things like who's it from, who's it to, your VAT ID, tax amounts, that kind of stuff. But that is a very good place to start when looking at your ERP, looking at that kind of data model of what information do I need. Outside of that, your best bets would be to look at UBL, so the Universal Business Language, or like maybe PEPL is always a good one to look at, which is a voluntary format, as I mentioned, that you can use. There is a lot of information. OECD has released some information, and the European Commission, as I said. So they would be good places to start to look at what's actually involved. Failing that, if you want to look at Avalara solution, we have some developer resources which literally go country by country of what we cover, and information such as what's mandatory, what's conditional, what's optional for that particular country. Because as much as it is easy to go, yeah, no, do the bare minimum, actually looking at what's relevant to your business probably makes more sense.
Thank you for that, because I think understanding all those standards that you just said is very good way to understand in which direction is e-invoicing going, even if you don't implement them, but just understanding them, you will get a feeling about the data that you need, and you will be able to check, is your system already having those data or not. You see over there, it's email address. So if somebody wants to connect with Avalara team related to all this topic, please feel free to send an email to that, or just connect directly with Ed on LinkedIn, or you can use my connections as well, for sure. Good. Coming back to the preparation for the retailers, what could they do already now in order to be ready? One idea is check the standards. Do you have any more ideas about what could retailers do already now?
Yeah, so there's a couple of points. One is to start doing your analysis and actually looking at what's going to be coming up for you, what new mandates are coming out. Are there any changes to existing mandates that you're already covering? The other thing is then internally, what systems are impacted. As much as you can go, yeah, is the data in there? Like, where is it? Are the downstream processes where you've got your warehouse management that's actually informing that? Do you need to get the data in there? Doing that kind of data analysis, gap analysis of your side in your environments means you are far more prepared for when you actually need to have that conversation. The other thing is to start looking at it today. Start speaking to different providers, finding out who actually is a good fit for your business, who is the kind of more, well, yeah, we covered this particular country and that's all we do, versus I as a business have 5 different countries across Europe and I need it to be covered, and start reaching out and finding out what's going on there. The other thing that I would recommend, and this really is sort of best practice that we've seen around this, and this came from Meta when I was doing a panel with them. They were basically saying that they had it where they got everything in place for Poland. They were going to spend all their time and efforts doing that. And then it got pushed back. Instead of just downing tools going, okay, well, we're not going to do this. What they said was, we know it's coming in the future. And they used that same engineering team and same product team to build a centralized canonical format to get data out of their different systems. That really was well ahead of anyone else that I'd spoken to, but they really were looking at that going, well, I don't want to waste my time and efforts here. We already were going to have the budget that we got approved for it. Let's get everything sorted and put in place so that when it comes around, we're ready for it, rather than it being that reactive kind of approach where it's like, oh no, I've got my notice from the tax authority, I need to start doing this. It was right, I want to get ahead of this journey and actually make sure that I'm in the best position I can be in.
So I think if customers are asking me what is the best way to prepare beside all those elements that you just mentioned, I think connect with a supplier like Avalara, and that's it, because these guys are doing that every day and just that and nothing else. So that's why I think the best way is to connect to the providers like you are, and then to talk to you more about all countries which are in their focus. We prepared email address is there, so do that. We are using for our customers, let's say, to inform them about e-invoicing as well. We are using an internet platform which we developed specially for that, to distribute the news and the documents and all these kind of things, which we called fiscalrequirements.com portal. And everybody can read the news over there as well, and you can even integrate those news as RSS feed in your email client. So first, staying informed, I think it's very important. And yeah, this is certainly something that you can do already now. Define the sources that you trust and that you want to consume in order to be informed on time if something new is happening in the world of fiscalization or in the world of e-invoicing, and lots of things are happening. So very good, and thank you very much, Ed. I think we are coming slowly to the end of the discussion today, do you have any kind of additional words that you want to send direction our retailers that are listening now and will listen in the future?
Well, I
If
think,
yes, now.
yep. So one of the things, just to add to your point, Avalara has a blog post that we put out information as well. There's an entire section on e-invoicing. So if you're wanting more resources to use to sort of stay on top of it and keep it at
Very good.
breadth of it, that is also a good solution. But my biggest thing really is start looking at this now. Ultimately, this is coming. Doesn't matter exactly when it's coming, it is coming. The more that you can do up now to actually get prepared to start identifying everything we've spoken about in the last hour, you will be in such a stronger position and more confident rather than having to wait and then be reactive and then stressing about how am I going to do it, how am I going to be compliant. So that is my recommendation, is just start looking at this now. Don't wait around.
Yeah, and don't think it's so easy, because it's really not easy. I can tell you, based on experiences which I have, every integration, and especially if you cooperate with the governments and you implement something that the governments are requiring, is never easy, and it takes always time. And as you are finished and you think everything is fine, then you find something and government change something, and then you have to change it as well.
Exactly. I've seen that there's a question that's come up a couple of times just about how do you keep up with evolving technology and regulations in e-invoicing. And that sort of goes to what you just said, of the fact that it does keep changing. And
Yes.
around this, Avalara has a tax we have a content team of over 300 people behind the scenes that are constantly looking at regulation changes. They are scraping the internet, they're talking to tax authorities. We are part of working groups, and so we're literally on Zugford and ex-Rechnung committees. I'm part of GINA on the PEPL committees. Like, our group and what we're doing is trying to stay at the forefront of this. And so we take all of that data from all the different locations, all the different formats, translate that into packages that our product team and engineering team can then put into our products to make sure that we're able to stay on top of this. And yeah, because it is constantly changing, not just within e-invoicing, but in tax in general. And as I'm sure you're aware, in fiscalization. Yeah, but I think that hopefully answers your question, Sonia.
This is perfectly, because I think 200 people which are focused on that kind of things, this is huge. So, and this can be easily used. So please, guys, do it, use it. It's for you there. Ed, thank you very much. It was really, really interesting talking to you. I just want to make a small invitation for our next event, which we will have on the 7th of actually this month, October. And we will talk about the changes of the law in Finland. There is a very interesting change of the law, which is actually influencing the retailers' e-receipts. The retailers will have to change something on the POS in order to send the e-receipts to the special, even governmental bodies, maybe the third-party companies which are certificated by the governments. I'm not sure yet. And this will change actually the retail processes on the POS. It's not fiscalization, but it's very, very similar to it. So we analyze that. And in a couple of days, actually in 2 weeks, we will inform you, if you like to join us, about the details of that. And we can discuss, of course, what does it mean actually for the retailer. So join us on 17th of October, and we will talk about Finland and the new requirements related to the e-receipt, which are just coming, and I think even tomorrow. So starting by the 1st of January next year. So it's a very, very, it's a tomorrow basically. Ed, thank you very much once again. And I'm sure we will stay in touch and answer all the questions. If we got some of them via email, let me find the email again, just to repeat this. Yes, here it is. Over there. So guys, if you have any questions for Avalara, please feel free to send it, or use the connections to me and send the emails to me, and I can redirect them or answer if it's related more to fiscalization. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you very much to guys joined us on the X space. This was the first one that we run like that, and the connection was okay, fine. Next time we need more engagement over there to test that as well, but we will take care of that as well. Yeah, thank you to everyone, and very special thanks to Ed. Talk to you
Thank you
again
for having
soon.
me.
It's our pleasure. See you guys. Bye.